Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on engineering. For those of you in the chat, if you could please just say hello or give me a thumbs up in the chat box, let me know you can see and hear us all okay. That'd be great. Brilliant, thank you. So today's panel consists of Lacey from Group DTI, who will be hosting today's webinar, Millie from DSTL, Sadie from Cummins, and Jessica from BAE Systems. There will be a dedicated time towards the end of the Q&A session. So if you've got any questions, please put them in the questions tab on your bottom right of the screen and not the chat tab. That'd be great. Thank you again for tuning in, and over to Lacey, and enjoy the webinar.
Thanks, Connor. Yeah, so as Connor said, my name is Lacey. I'm an editor at Target Jobs, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar on how to start your career in engineering. We have a really interesting panel of both recruiters, Jess of BAE Systems, and also 2 graduate engineers as well, which I will introduce you to. But just before that, I will run through how this webinar will go. So it'll be about 40 minutes of going through some really important, interesting talking points about engineering, specifically for graduates, and then we'll have about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for any of your questions. So like Connor said, in the questions box, if you write any questions that you'd like answered, you can put them in at any point during the webinar. And then at the end, we'll go through your questions and open it up to the panel. As Connor said, it works on an upvote system. So if you see any questions that you think are really good or that you would also like answered, give it a thumbs up and it will push it towards the top of the questions panel for us to get back to at the end. But for now, I will introduce you to our panel. So I'll go around in what is clockwise on my screen. I don't know if it is for you guys, but I'll start off with Sadie. If you could introduce yourself a little bit about what you do and your organisation.
Hi, yes, I'm Sadie Green. I'm a graduate engineer in Cummins Darlington, so I work in the product engineering department. I've worked here about 3 years. I took a placement year. I did a mechanical engineering degree at Newcastle University, and I returned back to Cummins after my master's year.
Nice, thank you. And if we can move on to Jess, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Jess. I am a recruitment advisor at BAE Systems. I've been here just under a year now, and I recruit to the air sector for graduates, industrial placements, also known as undergrads, and summer interns. So at BAE, we are a skilled collaborative and increasing community of over 90,000 in over 40 countries. And we're creating some of the world's most advanced technology-led defence in aerospace, marine, land and security solutions. I think our core is, and our purpose is that we play a part in protecting those who protect us, basically, making the future more secure for everyone. So yeah, that's me.
Cool, great, thanks Jess. And last but not least, Millie, if you could tell us a bit about yourself as well.
Hi, I'm Millie. I'm a communications engineer at DSTL, which is Defence Science and Technology Laboratories. So we're part of the UK Ministry of Defence, and we do science and technology exploitation, kind of future looking to protect all branches of our armed forces.
Great, thank you. I suppose I'll kick off with actually a question a little bit leaning more towards Sadie and Millie to begin with. If you could just tell us, and for everyone watching, a little bit about what you do currently, what your role is, kind of day to day, as much as you can tell us. I think it would be really interesting to know. So either of you can take the floor to start.
Do you want to go first, Millie?
You go first.
Okay, so yeah, I work at Cummins Darlington. So for those that don't know, Cummins is an engine manufacturer. So we supply to major OEMs such as Scania, Leyland Trucks. You probably see them up and down the motorway. We also provide to the military defence and other main customers across the globe. So my current role is I'm a graduate engineer in the product engineering department. So my department is responsible for looking after the specification of an order. So anything from customer point of order, we make sure that the engines are actually built to what the customer requires. So that includes making sure that we audit the first engine built from the first shop order to make sure that our production line is capable of producing the engine to the specification. We also look after the requirements for compliances. So we also look at every engine comes with a data plate, which basically makes sure it meets the regulations in the country it goes to. So we need to make sure that the power output on that is rates the requirements. So we're responsible for looking after that as well. And yeah, really, we just look after the product itself. So if any product improvement is necessary, we look after running projects to improve the product itself. So the current product, we can make any changes. We can change the drawings, change the CAD models. So yeah, we're kind of responsible for the specification itself.
Great. So it sounds like you're quite busy then.
Yeah, here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah. Do you work kind of solo on projects, or are you kind of part of a collaborative team, or what's the kind of dynamic?
So my daily job, I quite do things quite independently, but obviously reach out to people in my team, wider teams. So, for example, I've just come off the production line there, working with teams of the production line, trying to get an engine built to specification. So that's one side of my job. I also have jobs that entail working with other departments to get improvements sorted. So yeah, it's a mixture really, depending on what kind of projects I'm doing or what kind of work I'm on.
Definitely.
But yeah, I really enjoy different type of people, different teams, different departments. So yeah, get to see a wide range.
Cool, thank you. And over to you, Millie, as well, for yours.
So, I mean, I do something completely different. So that was really interesting. So I'm a communications engineer. So my day-to-day is I'm assessing different communication systems and different bearers of communications, going all the way from kind of HF all the way through to SATCOM. And I kind of assess and survey how they perform against different use cases. So that can involve being out in a field, doing field trials with some different units from the army, going all the way to kind of going out with the Navy and doing sea trials and being out sea for a week on ships just to see how different communication systems interact and if our antennas are potentially causing problems for different systems. And I also kind of do a lot of collaboration with other projects and teams around the lab. So it's slightly independent. We're always looking at what's coming out in academia, doing a literature review sort of assessment to make sure we're up and coming with the new technologies, and then liaising with different places in the army, the Navy, to make sure that what we're looking at fits into how they would actually use those systems.
Wow, that is interesting and definitely different. Yeah, it's interesting that you said that, because that kind of leads on to my next question for Jess, is that engineering is kind of like it's almost like an umbrella sector for loads of other subsectors and roles, and everything can be so different. So if I move on to my next question for you, Jess, what at BAE Systems, what sort of engineering roles do you hire for, and what do engineers in your kind of a field of work do?
Okay, yeah, no problem. So obviously we've got countless opportunities, especially in the engineering part, but they all sit underneath different business units. So we've got several different business units. I think BAE is probably known the most for the aerospace sector, but we do also recruit to many different other sectors. So we've got the air sector, submarines, naval ships, maritime services, electronic systems, land, shared services, head office and finance. I think I've hit all of them there. But then within each of those divisions, there are other areas, other engineering roles then available. So just to list them and name a few of those, we've got obviously our airframe engineers, aerospace engineers, systems engineers. Now systems engineers would fit into many of different of those business units. So we have systems engineers for the air sector, systems engineers for submarines, naval ships, maritime. So all of those. We have platform mechanical engineers, and that's just a few of them. So each business unit then has a variation of other engineering roles available. And I'd just advise anybody to go onto our website of any area that you've got interest in, and then kind of which business unit you have maybe a more of an interest in, to see what other roles are available, because there's just hundreds. I'd be here all day listing them all.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like you said, there's lots of different roles you can do in engineering, and hopefully this isn't too much of a broad question for you, but based on that, Jess, what would you say are kind of some of the key skills or qualities that it takes to become not a quote unquote good engineer, but kind of succeed in engineering in general, if that isn't too broad for you?
No, it's not too broad. I think mainly what we're looking for is, from a recruitment perspective, is somebody that's just really passionate about the role that they want to go into. We do appreciate that, obviously, certainly in our sector for graduates, they're going to be applying for many different roles within engineering. But it's always nice to hear from them have a real passion about the role that they're wanting to go into. I think in any any job that you're going into, you want to have a passion about it. So having a little bit of research and conducting it yourself, but somebody who's really enthusiastic and wants to, you know, really learn and have a career as opposed to just a job. They really want to learn the full aspects of it from head to toe, of all the inside and outside of the business, and what not just what we can do for their career progression, but what they can bring into the business. You know, somebody who's really enthusiastic, who's got a keen knowledge to learn, who wants to make the business the best place that it can be to work, I would say.
Yeah, so it can also be kind of about attributes you have, not just
not just what you've learned. Yeah, but working alongside the degree that you've done. Obviously, if you've done a degree, you've obviously got a keen interest in that area, and bringing that forward and bringing that across at interview. We're not saying you have to be the most social person, but from my perspective, when I'm speaking to someone, I want that to come through, that you're really passionate about something. So, you know, kind of talking about what your passions are outside of the workplace. And also, hiring managers are not just looking at what degree you have got, what other things have you done, and what other interests have you got to then progress in your career within BAE.
Yeah, definitely. That's quite interesting to hear for engineering as well, because you think it might specifically be about any technical skills you have, but it's nice to hear that it's also kind of other personal attributes as well. So that's really interesting.
Definitely.
Going from that, actually, I quite like Millie and Sadie's perspective on that. What would you say kind of attracted you or interested you in a career or a role in engineering initially? If I start off with Millie, if that's okay.
Oh, what attracted me to engineering? I was incredibly lucky, and I went to a secondary school where you could do electronics and engineering from year 7. And I had a really passionate teacher who started to teach me about electronics, and it kind of just clicked. And I then pursued that through to sixth form, and I did electronics again at sixth form study. And I then went to university, and it was just the natural fit for me. I built on what I learned, and I knew my electronic circuits quite well. And at university, I then kind of got to start choosing my modules, and wireless communications for me just was a whole world that opened up. Electrical, I avoid it like the plague. I don't like big numbers. I don't like big power, which made my down selection a little bit easier. And yeah, it was actually just a teacher when I was in year 7 at secondary school that really sparked it, and I just followed it on from there.
Yeah, that's really cool that it came from one teacher. That's a cool story. And interesting to know that, like you said, even though you're an engineer in one field, there are other aspects of it that you know aren't really your forte. So that's really interesting as well. Thank you. And Sadie as well, if we could hear from you.
Yeah, so mine's not just from one teacher. When I was back in school, I liked maths and science, but I didn't really like them in isolation, if that makes sense. I didn't want to be sat there doing maths sums all day, but I equally didn't want to be sat doing science all day. So I was in about year 9. It sounds a bit cringy, but I came to Cummins, where I am now. We came on a school trip, and I thought, oh, well, I could do like a bit of a mixture of both. So then that kind of influenced what I wanted to do at A level. So I did maths, physics, chemistry, and geography. And then that solidified what I wanted to do at uni. So I went and did mechanical engineering. Bit of a stab in the dark. I didn't really know which engineering field I wanted to go into, if that makes sense, because who does when they're about 18-year-old? But yeah, from there I loved it. I did some summer placements, and I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. But yeah, considering when I was about 14, I hadn't got a clue really. I just knew I liked maths, didn't like English. I just like maths and science. But yeah, I think I've made the right choice.
Yeah.
I hope I have anyway.
Sounds like it. It's another interesting story there. So thank you. Thank you for that. So I'm going to move on to something that I think will be quite important for a lot of people watching, is a bit of an insight into the graduate programs and kind of any training and support that you received whilst on that. So again, I will come back to you for this, Jess, but I am going to aim this question initially at Sadie and Millie, if that's okay. So I'll switch it up and start with Sadie this time, if you could give a bit of insight into the graduate program at Cummins.
Yeah, so I got taken on by Cummins as a placement student. So I did 3 years at university, and then between my bachelor's and master's year at university, I came and did a placement for Cummins. So I worked for the year, completely separate to university. And then when I went back to university to do my master's year, I was lucky enough to be offered a 0 hours contract. which accompanied my university work, so that was good. And then I came back as a graduate engineer. So in terms of a graduate program that I'm on, so I'm currently doing, I'm in the product engineering department now for 1 year, and I'm rotating into the team I was actually in for my placement year. So I came into the department I'm in now for a bit more on-site experience, because unfortunately my placement year was in COVID, so I worked the whole time at home. But it's been really useful just to rotate around the department to get a bit more exposure. And the training I've had has really been useful. So actually last Friday I was on a training course. I've been on numerous training courses within the company, provided by our company and external training companies, which has been good just to get me up to speed, because obviously you don't learn everything at university. You learn the basics, but you don't learn it specific to your job. So that's been really good. And the support I've had as well, it's been really useful, the support of me getting chartered alongside my graduate programme. So that's something else that's been really useful. But yeah, I'd really recommend it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we'll move on to chartership in a bit. Actually, I have a few questions on that, and it's quite interesting to know that you can move around different departments as well. That's quite good to get an insight into the different areas as well. So yeah, thank you for that. And Millie, if we could have a bit of your insight as well, please.
Yeah, so I came into it a bit of a different route. So I joined something called, what it was called DTUS, which was the Defence Technical Undergraduate Scheme. I'm now old, and they've changed the name of it to DSUS, which is the Defence STEM Undergraduate Scheme. And what that meant was, during my summers at university, I came and did some summer placements just for 10 weeks at a time, in different areas of the business. So DSTL has 5 different technical divisions. And I knew my technical knowledge from university, and actually how that applied to a job was beyond me. I didn't understand. So I managed to kind of get a little bit of exposure. And then when I started my graduate scheme, that meant that I knew roughly which of those 5 areas I wanted to fit into. And I then did 6-month placements. So I would spend 6 months working, I don't know, with, for example, the working dogs, and getting to understand how we train them and how we use technology to kind of assist in what they do as their role. I then moved and did 6 months on electronic countermeasures, which is using RF radio frequencies to create almost bubbles around our troops, so that radio detonated IEDs can't penetrate. I then moved and did a placement, which is where I currently sit, doing my wireless communications and looking at radios. And I also did placement with the C team and doing, this is where I went out to sea and doing kind of electromagnetic compatibility tests. And so, yeah, so in those 2 years, I did 4 different placements, and then I'd also done 3 placements during my degree. So moved around a fair old bit before I settled down and made some roots.
It sounds like you must get quite a lot out of it, though. I mean, that's quite a lot to do in that space of time. You must get quite a lot out of that program.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really helpful, because I personally found that I had picked my modules at university because I knew what I enjoyed, but actually translating that academic study into a career, it's a complete maze. And you hear about an opportunity that you think's a great fit, and I start to do the work and it wasn't what I wanted. And I found it equally valuable to have the experience to say that's not what I want to do, as it was for me to find a placement that I did fit and kind of circle back to and say that is what I want to do. Now I've, dipped my toe in the water in some other areas.
Yeah, definitely. And that's really interesting and something I didn't know. So I'm learning. That's really good to know. Thank you. And Jess, I said I would come to you. It'd be interesting if I could have a little bit of your insight, your perspective on BAE Systems graduate program, from your perspective, kind of what's the process? What are the kind of different avenues, if you could?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I second what Millie's just said there in regards to trying different areas. So we offer like summer internships, and we've got quite a lot of candidates that have come in on a summer internship in, just for example, say the aerospace sector. And then they've done ours is a 12-week placement. They've done the 12-week placement and then realised actually that wasn't quite what they wanted. So we always say to speak with what they will then be assigned as a line manager and have those continual conversations about where their skills may be best fit. And then the line manager usually will advise, actually, from where your skill set sits, why don't you try a summer internship in this particular area? So all the business units that I mentioned earlier, we all do summer interns for those. The undergraduate ones are a 12-month placement, so you can have a full year within the business in a particular sector, and then again you could come back and go, actually that wasn't for me either, and again you'd have self-development and personal development plans with your line manager and people within the business in other areas where they'll look at your skill set and go, you've got a really keen interest in this part but not maybe in this area, we would recommend this. So they're the best people to kind of speak to, especially after that full year. You've gained knowledge, you've gained experience, you've kind of maybe realised, like Millie had said earlier, what she then wanted to go into. So I always would recommend either doing a summer internship or an undergrad placement, because then that will lead on to advice from the hiring managers. It is performance dependent, so how you perform will determine whether we will look at what advice we give you going forward, whether it's a graduate or coming back on another undergraduate program. But there is that many opportunities, I feel, when you come into the business, for example, if you was a summer internship, to then progress through the business. Like I say, in other areas, or there will be advice throughout that process. But if you started as a summer intern, you can then progress into an undergrad or a graduate, and you will be advised along through that whole process. Once you are in the graduate scheme, there is like a 2-week full, I would say quite intensive induction program, where you are then given goals and aspirations. So you'll meet with your line manager on, like, I think it's every 3 to 4 weeks, and you look at a self-development plan on where you want to be at the end goal. Our graduate schemes are a minimum of 18 months and go up to 3 years. And the ultimate goal is that after that 3 years or 18 months, you're in a permanent position within BAE. We always have our plan, and our goal is what we call hire to retire. We want people to come into the business and then never want to leave. And I think that's really great, because they do put a lot of focus on how you can develop as a person and your attributes and your aspirations on where you want to be, and you are fully supported to achieve those aspirations and goals. Does that answer the question? I feel like I went off on a bit of a tangent there.
No, you answered it and more. It's really interesting that there's not only opportunities, lots of opportunities, and you can kind of be led into different areas. It's nice that it's kind of personable to your skills, and that you've got someone saying, I think you might be fitted to X, Y, Z. I think that's quite a nice, it
is, because you're not just a number, then you are a person, and they want to advise on where you would best fit within the business. So that's one thing I've found really, really helpful within this. And it's not what I've realized even in my own job, and I'm not in a graduate position, but from a recruitment perspective, is that you never stopped to progress. It's always really looking at the progression that you can make as a person, and it's encouraged, if anything. In some jobs it's kind of, we don't want to lose you because you know everything in this part, whereas I found within BAE it is, what can we do to better you and make you going down the career path you want to take, which I think is really great.
Yeah, definitely. That is really great. So thank you for that. Definitely answered. So yeah, as Sadie mentioned earlier about chartership, I suppose you can't really talk about engineering without covering that. It's quite an important aspect. So I will start with you again, Jess, just to get your perspective. Just wanted to ask if engineering graduates at BAE Systems work towards becoming chartered engineers, and if they do, what sort of thing that would involve?
They do, but I am going to be completely honest, because I don't want to give wrong answers. It's not my full field of knowledge, if I'm completely honest. I know it's available, and I know it's something that we do provide, but from my perspective in recruitment, it's kind of past my stage, if that makes any sense. My role is getting people in the business and starting them on that graduate journey, but I just wouldn't want to give any incorrect answers. But if there is somebody who's really looking into that in regards to BAE, and they want, you can give my email address out, or I can leave it wherever within this call. I'm more than happy to find that answer and provide it at a later date, if that's
Definitely.
okay.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose with chartership in general, it's always best to do your individual research anyway, because there's lots of different areas. So it's always best to do that anyway. But thank you.
No problem.
And so for Sadie and Millie, my question for you would be, are either of you working towards becoming a chartered engineer? And if you are, what does that involve? And even if you weren't, any of your insight would be great. So if I start with Sadie.
Yes, so I'm working towards being a chartered engineer from the Institute of Mechanical Engineering. So I started that a few months back, progressing well, hopefully. So the company actually sponsors you to do it. So I get assigned a mentor, which I meet with every month, which is really useful. She's completely separate to my department, my line of work. She's not aware of what work I'm doing. It's more of a kind of a mentorship kind of thing. You then get sponsored through the company. So I think it's a 4-year program. So yeah, Cummins are willing to help you and find your projects that will help you become a chartered engineer, which is really useful.
Yeah,
it's always something that I've wanted to do, but it's good that there's support as well.
Definitely, that's great. Thank you for that. And if Millie, you could give a bit of an insight as well.
Yeah, so I'm looking at chartership through the IET, which is the institute, and I've been so similar to Cummins, you get assigned a mentor, and I don't know if anybody's looked into it, but there's a whole long list of competencies that you need to tick off to say that, you know, there's technical competencies, and then there's kind of behavioral competencies, and especially if you work in somewhere like DSTL or the civil service, we're very competency focused. So it's not surprising. And what you are able to do with your mentor is you can talk through the work that you've done, understand how it fits, and you create effectively a logbook that says, for this competency, I've performed this action and this action and this action, and so I tick a box to say that I've done that, and so on and so forth down the whole list. And my mentor is available. It's completely ad hoc. If I want to reach out to them, if I've written up a couple of pages of my logbook, they're able to read through it. Or some people have a more formalized structure of weekly check-ins and that kind of thing. It's quite nice though, because that's something that I'm driving and the business supports me in driving that, but there is no pressure from DSTL for me to become a chartered engineer. They're incredibly supportive, but it's still my personal choice to kind of choose the institute that I want to charter with and to push that process along. And if in a couple of years or a couple of months something happens and my life changes and it's not a great time for me to pursue that application, they're fine kind of putting it on pause, and it's a fully supported system that we've got.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting to hear you say that, actually, because I only know a certain amount about chartership. I've done some research, but it's interesting to know that there's not always pressure. But I suppose my question would be, do you think, you know, and for the audience watching, do you think it is beneficial to be chartered, or do you think, you know, does it make a huge difference in your career as an engineer, or, you know, can you be just as successful and move around different sectors just as well without one? Would be interesting from both Sadie and Millie, if you could.
So from my perspective, I think it's nice to be recognised from a kind of a third party body that I'm a good engineer, but it has never detracted from anybody kind of trusting my ability to do my job. And I know a lot of people much senior than I am, and some of our most senior engineers aren't chartered, and some of them are. So I think particularly if you're staying within the civil service, it doesn't make a huge difference on your career opportunities. It's just personal preference. I don't know if Jessica might have a different opinion, kind of looking at external to industry, but from in a defence sphere, looking at the civil service, we don't benchmark it to mean anything.
Right, I'm with you.
I fully agree with that.
Great. Would you have any kind of additional comments, Sadie, or kind of everything been said?
Yeah, similar. So like it was my own choice to do chartership. It wasn't forced on me. It was just always something I wanted to do. Like Millie said, a lot of the senior management here have it. Some of them don't. I don't think it's a kind of must have, must not have. But yeah, like Millie was saying, it's nice to be recognised and like again an extra achievement for that. But yeah, I don't think Cummins looks at it as a requirement. It's more of a nice to have.
Definitely. Yeah, well, that's great to know. Thank you guys for that. Just before I move on to the next questions, I'd just like to remind anyone who may have come in halfway through the webinar that there is a questions panel, that if you have any questions that you'd like answered, please pop them in there. And if there are any questions that you see in there that you agree with or you think are good and you would really like answered as well, give it a thumbs up so that it's kind of upvoted to the top. We'll come back to it shortly towards the end of the webinar, just as a reminder. But yeah, moving on to another important point of, I suppose, any graduate role or any sector in general is finding work experience and gaining skills, which I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions about anyway. So if I just open it up to everyone really, but I suppose to Sadie and Millie to start with, how did you, if you did, go about getting any work experience as a student? Start with Sadie.
So yeah, like I said earlier, I did 2 summer placements during my degree, and then I also did my year-long placement at Cummins. So to get the summer placements, it was more of a send an email into a local company, get some contacts, and hope that they'd offer me an opportunity, which I was successful in. But for applying for the Cummins year placement, it was like a graduate application would be. So I just applied through the Cummins website. You went through series of application processes, such as like screening tests and interviews. I had an assessment centre. But my advice is just to look around I always looked at, like, sounds silly, but looking around for like local engineering opportunities. Even look at the engineering companies in the place that you'd like to live or work. So I'd look at in my hometown, I was looking at the engineering companies and just thought, oh, I could apply to them. I could apply for them. So it's kind of just getting contacts or even reaching out. I think people find useful on LinkedIn as well. I haven't used it myself, but I think that's becoming more popular. But yeah, I used a lot of graduate websites such as targetjobs to find different opportunities, and even just to find companies' names and then go from there.
Yeah.
So that's how I went about it.
Cool, thank you. I mean, definitely not a silly point to say, you know, to apply for any local engineering companies, because I think sometimes when you're starting off trying to find work experience or gain skills, you don't know where to start. So starting locally is a great point. So that's really great advice, I think. Thank you. Millie, did you have any experience of your own you wanted to share?
Yeah, so I was on my undergraduate scheme, which made it slightly easier because I had my summer placements. But in and of those, I didn't actually have to work at DSTL. I was able to kind of work externally if I wanted. And so I used to go on websites and find the recruitment email address and just send an email that kind of said, hi, this is my name, this is my degree, this is, these are some of the modules I really enjoy. I've got 10 weeks. Can I come work for you? And I was in a fortunate position that I was looking kind of around my parents, where I was able to live rent free, as they greatly appreciated, I'm sure. And I just sent off quite a few different emails, and a couple of places got back to me. And from there, it was then my choice in kind of discussing with them what they could offer me. And I was able to really target my experiences is what I hadn't managed to achieve in my summer placements previously. And similarly, I think here at DSTL, we do a summer placement and we do internships. And it's a very similar process of, if somebody says, actually, I really want a job and a job would be great. However, this is what I think I'd like to do. We take that into account and we tailor towards that, because there's so many different opportunities that if you've got a preference and can point us in a direction, we'll do our best to tailor to it, because there probably is an opportunity that aligns to what you're looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And I think it's an important takeaway that there's no harm in sending emails.
No.
I think it can be a bit of a bit of a fear, probably not amongst some of the people watching, but I've had that before, of not knowing, do I just send the email? But like you said, it can really pay off. So I think that's a really important point.
I'm the one that ends up with thousands of emails.
Yeah. I was about to say, I'm sure it reaches you. Yes, yeah.
I do try and answer as fast as I can.
Yeah, don't bombard. So actually, Jess, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on that as a recruiter. Do you have any kind of advice for students for gaining work experience and skills, or do you offer internships yourself? And
yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing is, especially coming in as, like, if you're coming in with a summer internship or even an undergrad or a graduate, we're not expecting tons of experience. We're not looking at an application form and going, yeah, they've not got enough experience. schemes, the beauty of our schemes are, we know that a lot of people are either fresh out of university, not had the work life experience yet, and that's actually a selling point, I would say, at BAE, because they're coming in and brand new into the work environment, and we're going to teach you all those aspects. I think the biggest thing is possibly doing a summer internship would probably be a way in. I would definitely say a lot of our summer internships that have gone through that process have probably started as a summer internship and then gone on and now, you know, are really successful within BAE, but they've started on a summer internship and then been able to be advised moving forward on what the next step is. And I would say 95% of the summer internships that come in actually end up within the graduate scheme or with a permanent position at the end of it. It is performance related. So if you perform well enough and you've got, you've built that rapport with your line manager, they will be the best person that can advise you further on how you want to progress with your career. And if it's within staying at BAE or what you can do going forward. So we don't actually look from a recruitment perspective of any experience that you've had prior. I would just recommend, do hobbies, list your hobbies that you've done. Let us find out some things about you as a person. That's what sells it, I would say, at BAE. Oh, you've done, I don't know, some modelling, you've done some modelling with models and clay or something like that. That's a starting point that we'll have a conversation with, and something that probably the hiring managers will go, oh, you've got an interest in this. So it is all about an overall and what you can bring and what your interests involve.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, actually. Across all different areas of work, but I suppose with engineering specifically, and people that might think they might have to have a certain set of experiences or technical skills. And like you said, it could be something that's not directly related, but it could be relevant and it could be transferable across. So it's important to kind of note down anything that you've done that you can
absolutely
yeah, definitely. Thank you for that.
I was sorry, just to jump in on that, I would also say when I was at university, I used to get really stressed because everybody seemed to have hobbies that were like, I like to code on the weekend, and personally my brain was absolutely fried by the time I hit Friday. And so my hobbies were, I like to go to the gym and keep active, but I was really into kind of going to defence air shows, which is why I work for the Ministry of Defence. And that's an okay hobby. It's okay to point out that you don't code on the weekend and you don't make robots in your free time. It's great if you do, but you don't, like, engineering doesn't have to be your life to be an engineer. And it used to bother me quite a lot that I used to get really quite stressed that people recruiting would think that I didn't care enough because it was my job or I did it in education. But I have the passion for it. It's just I didn't have the brain cells and the capacity to do it 24/7. So showing passion for other things is transferable into you showing passion for what you're educated in.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. I think that's really reassuring for a lot of people watching, and something I wish I'd have known when I was applying for certain roles. So yeah, that's really helpful and definitely be reassuring to those watching. So thank you for that, Millie. I'm going to move on to, I think, probably the last point before I move on to some of the questions from the audience, and that's about the application process, which I'm sure lots of people would like to know about. If you could just give a kind of brief idea. So if I start with Jess, if you could kind of give us a little bit of information on the application process for engineering roles and any advice you'd give to those on this webinar for applying for engineering roles or internships.
Absolutely, yeah. So the application thing, I think the most difficult thing is, and we have highlighted this before, is basically knowing what you want to do, because there's so much available out there. It's looking at what your degree, if you're going for a graduate position, what degree suits into which role. But if you do click into certain roles or a certain sector, that would probably help. I'm sure people that are on this call will kind of have a general idea of what they're kind of interested in. I'd say focus on which business unit you're thinking it sparks your interest. So for example, I'm just going to talk about air because that's the sector I come from. There are hundreds of jobs available in the air sector. So it's knowing which position to go for. So if you're still in university, you're going to be looking at summer internships or an undergrad placement. If you're looking at leaving university, you need to have qualified and got your degree. It does list that on our website, but I think that's a starting point, is knowing which business area that you want to go into. The application form part of it is pretty straightforward. Your standard questions, your name, your address, where you live, and what degree, what you qualify in. When you go to apply, it will, if you've not hit if you've not got the qualifications that are required for that role, it'll bounce back to you and tell you that. So it'll offer you can you have a look again at our website and look at something else? But you should be able to determine if your degree does qualify for that particular role. Once you've done that part, the second part is you do the first stage of going through that process is then to do an online assessment. People always freak out when I say online assessment, but it is quite straightforward. I've done it myself to know what everybody has to go through. And it's basically talking to a computer screen, answering a couple of questions. And they're usually quite basic questions, you know, why BAE Systems? Tell us a time you've had a complex problem and you've overcome it. They're pretty standard questions. And then there's a bit of a game session at the end of it. And that is literally it. So from the date in which you apply to the assessment, you have 7 days to complete it. So I would just advise not applying if you know you're going to go on holiday the next day. Because you do have 7 days in which you need to complete it. I think the biggest thing within BAE, because we do have quite a lot of applicants on a daily basis, the process can seem quite long-winded in the sense of you could have applied, say, last year and you're only just being contacted to move on to the next stage. That's because of how many intakes we have, how many applications are coming through. So my biggest advice would be if you're going to apply, make sure you're not then busy within the next 7 days. I know a lot have reached out to myself and said, you know, I've gone to apply, I've got 7 days, but I'm stuck doing hundreds of exams. You can apply at any point, and especially for the graduate scheme, we don't have a close date. We just wait until we've got plenty of candidates and then we feed back to you. We do email quite regularly, and we will keep in regular contact with you. So if it has been a bit of time that you've applied and you want to reach out, there is an email address that you can reach out to, which will advise you when you're applying of the email address, and then your recruiter will contact you and keep you as up to date as I possibly can. In regards to any advice I can give with your application form, just put as much information as you can on there, like I said earlier, but it is predominantly down to the assessment. So it's a couple of questions and a bit of a gaming assessment. If you do have any accommodations that are required, for example, you struggle with maybe, say, dyslexia, you can click there's an accommodation section, and that will give you more time to answer some of the questions, and it will reduce the gaming part that you have to do, and then it is scored manually. And then we contact successful candidates. The successful ones are usually top scorers, and they're put forward to the hiring managers, and they'll look at all that information that I've recommended putting in. So any bits of hobbies that you've done, what your passions are, why you want to do this role, that will be forwarded to the hiring managers. So that's start to finish on how the process works for us. Does that answer that question?
Yeah,
I do feel like I go off on a tangent.
No, it's lots of detail, which is really helpful for everyone watching and myself. I'm learning. So yeah, that's really great. Thank you. And
no problem.
If I could just get a little a quick insight from Millie and Sadie, if you kind of remember what your recruitment process involved for your graduate job, and if you have any additional tips. I know Jess has covered a bit, but if you have anything that you wanted to add to that, it'd be really great.
Yeah, I'll jump in first. So I went on the Civil Service Jobs website, and there's a really helpful filter, and you can search for engineering, and then you can search for like specific engineering if you want to. And my job came up as a graduate position, but within the business, any position that's advertised as a level 4 is suitable for graduates. So even if it doesn't specifically say graduate, don't let that put you off. And very similar, there's some kind of questions about can you explain when you've done leadership? Can you explain kind of how you tackle this problem? And then we did have some competency questions. So mine was a maths and English assessment. The maths assessment was somewhat reminiscent of GCSE maths, where you're in King's Cross station and there's 5,000 trains coming at once, and which platform do you get to and how many hurdles do you jump over to get there. And then the English assessment was more kind of understanding, I think, how you behave. So somebody's told you something in confidence, what do you do with that information? Do you keep it to yourself? Do you tell your line manager? And it's just doing that kind of bit of behavioral assessment of how you would tackle and approach certain problems. After that, I was reached out to do an interview, which we held over Teams, and then going on from there, it was all about getting security clearance, because everybody that works at DSTL needs to hold a level of security clearance. And then it was in the door, got a laptop, a week later working on a project, and
Ready
it's
to
not
go.
stopped since then.
Great, thank you for that, Millie. Just because I'm conscious of time, sorry, Sadie, I'm just going to close off the time talking points there, just so we can get on to some of our questions from the audience. So the most popular question, it looks like, is what should my CV look like to attract recruiters' attention without having any previous relevant experience for a mechanical engineer? I know we've kind of touched on that a bit before with work experience, but perhaps if I throw that over to you, Sadie, because it didn't get to talk for the last point, if you had any kind of tips there.
So I'm no expert on CVs at all, but what I did was I kind of tried to highlight what I'd learned from certain aspects. So, like, say for university, like what projects had you learned, like done, but what did you learn from it, not just what you did. Like what skills did you develop from that? If you have any work experience, write down as well what you did on that, and then what skills you learned from that. Like Millie was saying earlier, put what hobbies you have. Like my hobbies weren't engineering at all. I like going on walks, which has got nothing to do with engineering. But it kind of shows that you're like a well-rounded person. Well, I'd like to hope so. But like, so you're not just living and pretending to be something that you're not. Just put in like what you like. I have like a little bit of a summary at the top and like highlight what key skills I've competencies I've got. I'm not sure if that's right or wrong, but that's kind of where I've done with my CV.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree. And if anyone has any input, shout out and let me know if you had anything to add to that. But don't worry if not, I can move on to the next one.
I just think from a recruitment perspective, like you say, if it's short and sweet, we're going through hundreds of applications on a daily basis. So I don't want information overload. If it's just literally the skills, like you said, Sadie, that you've learned, that you've developed, when you've gone through uni, not just what you've done, exactly what Sadie said, but just bullet points some of the things, and maybe even bullet points some of the keen interests you have. It would make you a rounded person if you go out, you like going out on walks. That's great. It doesn't have to be that like you said before, Millie, everything's around engineering. We want to know you as a person and what skills you possess going forward. Are you going to be taught and learn a lot more things as well? So it's not about all the experience that you have. It's probably some of the attributes as you as a person that we want to learn about as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you for that. So if I get to the next popular question, we've got, hello everyone. Will you tell more about sponsorship, or do you have early career or graduate schemes? I know we've kind of covered graduate schemes and summer internships and those kind of things. But potentially, I mean, I don't know too much myself about sponsorship. So if anybody has anything they'd like to say about sponsorships to answer that question, that would be useful.
I'm not 100% clear. Is that sponsorships in regards to, say, like visas? If that is, we do offer sponsorships for certain roles. So, if you're not a UK national, for example, then we do offer certain visas and sponsorships to work within this country. But I will just add that there are certain restrictions on some of our roles. Not all, but some of the roles. And your recruitment advisor would be able to advise that going further. If you applied and it wasn't a suitable role, you would be reached out to. I don't know if that's any help at all, or I'm going off on the wrong boat there. But I just thought I'd add that.
Trying to figure it out myself, but there's another one here that says, can you provide some insights for getting a sponsorship job in mechanical design engineering? So yeah, doesn't mean too much to me. I'm not entirely sure. So if that makes it any clearer for you guys, but I think you've kind of covered what you know there. So, and like I've said, individually, if you look on individual websites or send emails if you have any of these questions to individual recruiters, hopefully that can answer your questions. We have quite a specific one here, but it's quite an interesting one. Recently, biomedical engineering graduate looking to start a career after a long gap. Can you give pointers as to where to get experience? If I just open that up to anybody who wants to answer that one.
I suppose. Okay, I'll start. So as a company, we take on biomedical. So we've got a CBR division, which is chemical, biological, and radiological. So, for example, when COVID was kicking off, our biology division were the people in. So we've got a lab, which is one of 3 level 4 labs in the country. So our lab here at Porton was the one that identified the kind of what was needed to go in the vaccines, and also going back a couple of years when the Novichok poisonings happened here in Salisbury, it was the DSTL lab that identified the Novichok poisonings. So it's a division which is kind of very heavily lab based, and we do have quite a lot of biomedical people that work over there. And it's the exact same process. If you want to apply for a placement, you are welcome to. It's not just undergraduates that are allowed to do placements. We take graduates, or you can apply for a graduate scheme position or a level 4 position.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you for that, Millie. I think a lot of these as well, yeah, some of them are quite specific. So, I mean, always be encouraged to go onto the individual websites and, make sure you know about internships, placements, deadline dates, all of those things. Always best to check the individual websites. But just for a bit of insight on internships, as there seem to be quite a few questions, we have a question that says, can I apply for an internship while studying in the last year at university? That's from a BSc Hons Computing, honours computing student. If anybody has, I mean, again, you'd have to check individually, but if anybody has any advice for students who want to apply while in the last year of university, is that a possibility? If I go with Sadie.
I'm not too sure about Cummins. Yeah, I'm not too sure. But it's always worth, like you were mentioning earlier, it's always worth an email just to clarify it. I don't see why you couldn't do it. I'm assuming the question means after they finish their final year or within it. I'm not too sure. But yeah, just send an email. Someone will get back to you with the proper answer. But yeah.
Definitely, thank you. This is a question specifically directed to Millie, which is for can international students apply for DSTL, if that's something that you know?
Unfortunately not. DSTL is for UK nationals only, and if you're a dual national, unfortunately you'd need to give up your alternative nationality.
Great, thank you for that clear answer. Yeah, we have got quite a few more on here. If we could split this, and this is quite an interesting one if we have time for this to be our final question. It's great to see females represented on the screen. What is the actual split between male and female at your companies? And to the graduates, do you feel outnumbered? Is it quote unquote laddie? And how are they encouraging more females in? I think is quite an interesting question. So whoever wants to take the floor, I know it's quite a good one.
I'll just add that we've done a course. No, it's all right. You go, Sadie.
Go on, sorry. Are you sure? My experience is the split. Obviously, I'm in a production environment, so I work in the engine factory. So typically, it is more male-based, but that doesn't put me off at all. I'm in a team of, I think there's 13, 14 of us, and there's me, myself, and another lady that work in my team. But it really doesn't bother me at all. The laddie environment, I've never been exposed really to it. I quite enjoy it, to be honest. It's quite a mixture of different type of people, different environments. So yeah, I quite enjoy it, to be honest. But it's good to be seeing that there's more engineering getting into it.
Definitely, thank you. It's an important question. If we had perhaps maybe about 30 seconds from someone else, if they wanted to give an input, just cautious of time, but it'd be interesting to hear if Millie or Jess has anything to say.
I just wanted to add that we ran a programme last year and it is continuing this year, which is called Women in Insight. And you can sign up to be interested in that. And what that's doing is encouraging more women into engineering. So we just give a bit of a talk on how maybe to best prepare to get yourself into engineering, what tips and advice you can do. And we as recruiters are reaching out to those women that show interest and just giving a little bit of talk. It worked last year. I think the numbers, I don't know off the top of my head, but I know within the air sector, we predominantly focused on this Women in Insight event, and it generated about 25 extra women coming through the doors, which doesn't seem massive on the grand scale of BAE, but that's just one sector because I'm not 100% sure on all the business units. But yeah, if you look out, even just go onto the internet and have a look at BAE website for Women in Insight, there's a lot of events being run at the minute, and we're trying to encourage that going forward.
Really sorry to cut you off, Jess, but just because we've got 1 minute left, it was really great. Sorry to cut you off because I know we've got to have Connor come in and just give his kind of closing of the webinar, but it's a really important question, and thank you all for your insights. Thank you all for attending, to all the interesting panelists, and for everyone attending the webinar. I hope it was useful for you. It was useful for me. So yeah, thank you all for your time, and over to Connor.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. That was really, really interesting. I really enjoyed listening into that. For everyone watching, I'm just going to put on screen a link to our Target Jobs events page, so you can keep up to date with these kinds of events. We run webinars really regularly, like I'm going to say. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. There you go. Can everyone see that on screen? Good stuff. Yeah, it's like I said, thank you very much to all our panelists. Yeah, we run webinars very regularly on all different subjects. And next week, we have 2 tech-themed webinars on getting into tech without a tech degree and how to get a graduate job in IT. So go on the link, follow the page, and sign up to the events. Thank you all for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.